So, what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, you missed a great day. I don't know if it's because the sun is out and it's up early or what, but just the energy. Well, we were all transfigured, transformed, which is appropriate because today was Transfiguration Sunday. And we started the service by engaging with the kids and some other folks with the story sort of Moses going up the mountain and his glowing face and how people were afraid of that and he had to cover it. But but rather than talk about that, we looked at Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses. And I just happen to have a sort of small 18-inch version of it, and we looked at it, and the kids looked at it, and I asked them what was different about it. As they looked at it, they recognized that this statue of Moses, he's holding the Ten Commandments, but he has horns growing out of his head. And we wondered why he had horns, and it was suggested that perhaps the horns were there so that he could hang the veil from them, or that Moses was maybe part goat. And as we talked about it, I revealed the truth of the story, which was that Michelangelo was working from an early Latin translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, and they mistranslated Moses and his glowing flesh to Moses and his horned flesh. And so Michelangelo, believing what he was reading, created a statue of Moses with horns because the Bible said so. And we acknowledge that sometimes we're wrong, even when we are absolutely sure. Sometimes we have to be reasonable and bring our thoughts and our experience to Scripture. And sometimes we have to recognize that we're not right. Sometimes we get it wrong, and so a little humility is perhaps in order. The kids like that. But then we went on to the story of the Transfiguration. Jesus going up the mountain with Peter and James and John and glowing, dazzling white, and being in the presence of Elijah and Moses, and hearing the voice of God identify Jesus as my beloved with whom I'm pleased. Listen to him. And we wondered what the Transfiguration meant to us in 2016, in a time when we wouldn't recognize Moses and Elijah if we were on the subway with them. And truth be told, we probably wouldn't recognize Jesus if he walked to the front door. So what does the story mean to us? And I suggested that nearly everything I've ever needed to know I can learn from the Transfiguration. And so we talked about a variety of things today. We talked about how sometimes you have to make an effort to experience God fully. We can't just sit around and wait for it. Sometimes you have to go up a mountain. And sometimes you have to get away from the world and the cares of the world. Sometimes we have to let go of some of our worries and our preoccupations so that we can hear that still, quiet voice speak to us and remind us that we're beloved. So yes, we have to make an effort, and sometimes we have to be quiet. And sometimes we have to recognize as well that the big change isn't necessarily in the world, but it's in us. It's fair to ask, did Jesus change in the Transfiguration as much as Peter changed? His view, his vision, the way he saw Jesus. Was that what changed? Was Jesus glowing, dazzling white, or was Peter finally able to see Jesus for who he truly was? The Son of God. God's presence in our lives, in our community. Whatever your conviction on that, whenever you imagine whether you see a horned Moses or a glowing Moses, however you read that story, it's important to recognize that real change happens when we ourselves are prepared to also change. Not that we have to throw our convictions away, but we have to recognize that maybe there's a new way of seeing things, a better way. And if we're open to change, it's amazing how often the world can change. We recognize that. And as we shared what we learned from Transfiguration, we also recognize that we understand how Peter wants to stay on the mountaintop and just keep that moment. We would love to relive our first kiss over and over again. We'd love to stay in the honeymoon forever. But the truth is, honeymoons end. So do kisses. And we can't stay on the mountaintop forever. We have to go down into the valley where real life is lived, where God's presence matters more than a dazzling light show. But we don't ever have to forget that we've been on the mountain. We don't ever have to forget about God's presence, and we can still feel it with us, even when we're not on the mountaintop. So that's what we shared today at Jubilee, and I wish you were here with us to share it. But I invite you to consider that story. It's in all four Gospels, so it must be important. What does it mean? What could it mean to you? What are your mountaintop experiences, and how do you stay connected to them when you're down in the valley, in the real world? And perhaps you'll get a chance to share some of your thoughts with me, with us, because hopefully we'll get to see you soon. But until we do, God bless.